Hello, and welcome to episode 11 Motivation Effective Strategies for Change.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
Wow, it is finally springtime. The blooms are blooming everywhere. I think I have every color imaginable in the garden, which is just amazing. Now, I am on call tonight. I'm doing this in the evening. I am hoping that no babies decide to come before I get this recorded. My son's 21st is coming up and I've got a lot of work to do tomorrow, which is a day off. And so I thought I'd try to get this recorded tonight. Now, a little secret. Again, this is my third episode of this particular topic. I was going to do motivation the very first episode of Opt to Thrive. I had it all recorded and ready to go, and then something didn't sit right. Just didn't like it. I thought something was missing. And there were other topics that just felt a bit more important, so off I went, and I came back to motivation again before the last episode. It was going to be episode 10. But again, I recorded it, something just not right, just something was missing. So I have gone back and done a lot more thinking, and I am trying it again for the third time. And if you're listening to it, then I've obviously got it right because I must be happy with this one. So let's get started. So why motivation? Well, a lot of us want to make some changes in our lives, and sometimes we need a little bit of motivation in order to make the changes or meet the goal or get rid of a habit or adopt a new one. Now, I'm going to start this episode with a little story. There was a young man walking down the street and happened to see an old man sitting on his porch. Next to the old man was his dog, who was whining and whimpering. The young man asked the old man, "What's wrong with your dog?" The old man said, "He's laying on a nail." The young man asked, "Laying on a nail? Well, why doesn't he get up?" The old man replied, "It's not hurting him bad enough." Like that dog in the story, sometimes it takes a lot of discomfort for us to get up off that nail. There's something we want to change. It's making us uncomfortable. But maybe if we shift a bit to the left or to the right, maybe we can ignore it a bit longer. Where are you today? Is there a change that you'd like to make in your life? Today, I want to talk about strategies. Strategies we can use to get ourselves up off that nail before it causes a nasty, festering wound and we have no other choice. I know I've said it before and I'll probably keep saying it. Our brains are amazing. Our brains exhibit something called neuroplasticity, and that is the ability to change neural pathways. So no matter how long we've been practicing something, negative thinking, overeating, smoking, codependency, it doesn't matter. We have the ability to change. I didn't say it was easy, but I will say it's possible. And just by believing in the possibility, you've made a huge leap in the right direction. Now, this story illustrates perfectly the concept that it's sometimes more comfortable not to change than it is uncomfortable to change. So even though the nail may be hurting, it's outweighed in your brain by the amount of effort, in other words, the discomfort it's going to take to get up off that nail. It's easier just to stay the same, keep doing what you're doing, than it is to change. So in order to make changes, we could either decrease the discomfort to change, or we could decrease the comfort of staying the same. In other words, make it easier to change and make it harder to stay the same. This is where I want to touch on something called the stages of change. The stages of change are something that most GPs might think about when people are trying to stop smoking. But with any change, There's a well-identified cycle that we go through. The first stage is pre-contemplation. In pre-contemplation, we don't really have any intention of changing the behavior. It might cross our minds once in a while, but the nail isn't hurting very much. And there's no reason really for us to decide to make that change or do that thing. It's not even really on our radar. But then we move into the next stage, which is contemplation. It's when you become aware that there's a problem, but you don't yet have any commitment to take action. So you might just decide that your pants are getting a little uncomfortable and you start to consider or contemplate making a change, losing some weight in this example. And then the next stage is preparation. So now you've decided, I'm going to do something about it. You do the prep work, you make a plan, you decide how you're going to go about making the change or meeting the goal. And so you've done your preparation. You're ready, you're armed with a plan. And then comes the next stage, which is action. And that's when you do the work. You do the work, you reach your goal, and you make it to the next stage, which is maintenance. So maintenance is where the new behavior replaces the old behavior. You've made a sustained change. But then sometimes, somewhere along the way, you quit or you get to maintenance and there's relapse. Either way, you fall back into the old patterns of behavior. I want to say a couple of things here. I want to say it's important to have compassion for yourself. Making changes isn't easy, or as the old adage goes, everyone would be doing it. The very good news here is that each time that you go through these stages, you're going to learn something. You're going to get a little bit stronger. And at some point, it's likely you're going to come back into contemplation again where you're thinking, okay, look, I think I need to make a change. It's becoming uncomfortable again. I'm done ignoring it. And you're going to try again. One of these cycles is going to stick. It's going to stick and you're going to land in the final stage, which is maintenance. And you're going to stay in maintenance. So be kind to yourself if you do end up relapsing or quitting. When you accept something, it doesn't mean that you agree with it or you condone it. In this case, it might be that you just accept, okay, I've relapsed. There's no upside to beating yourself up about it. Get up, get back on the bike, and try again. When we decide to make a change, one of the most important things that we can do to set ourselves up for success is to find a really good why. Why am I doing this? The better your why, the more likely you're going to be to reach your goal or make your change. If I asked you to jump into an icy pool of water just because I wanted to see you do it, you'd probably say no, maybe a few other things. If I said I'd give you $50,000, you'd have a pretty good why and you'd be more likely to do it. If you're not at all motivated by money, think of something you're motivated by and replace it with that. The point is, a really good why is going to help you reach your goal. Part of the process of making changes, especially really, really tough ones, like stopping smoking, losing weight, implementing an exercise program, changing health habits, getting your cholesterol down, getting your blood pressure down, those kind of things. What it takes to do those things, you're going to have a good why, because sometimes I have to do it for my health isn't enough. So you have to dig a little deeper. Often it can be hard finding your why. So today I want to give you some questions to ask yourself, to do some self-exploration so that you can build your why. That's where we're going to start. Build it big enough so that you decrease the comfort of staying the same. You want this why so strong that when you get discouraged along the way, you can come back to it and refill your determination and strength to get back up and keep going. Now, I'm a big believer in pen and paper. There's something magic that happens when you get your thoughts down on the paper. It can be really therapeutic. So I want to ask you these questions, and I would love for you to do these exercises in a journal. Maybe you could have a special journal just for this. The first question is, why do you want to make this change? Be honest, don't overthink it, just write freely whatever comes up and keep writing until you don't have anything else to write. The second question is, how will your life be different if you make this change now, in a year, in 10 years, in 20 years? Really take a minute to see your future self in your mind's eye. Question 3. What will life look like in 1, 10, 20 years if I don't make this change? Again, really take a second to visualize what that might look like. Now, along with a good, strong why, making a commitment to this goal is one of the most important things you can do. Because if you're committed to something, it's more likely you're going to do it. It's really important that from the beginning you decide, am I doing this or am I not doing this? Am I having a solid go or not? What we know is that commitment helps to crystallize your goal, make it more specific and doable. Instead of just a vague intention, it sets a clear target and often a timeline for achieving it. It helps you focus and prioritize your goal over other things that might otherwise distract you. Making a commitment takes a goal from just having a wish into a structured plan, and it increases the likelihood that you're going to achieve it. Now, remember the thought model? We went over it in the episode, If You Change Your Thoughts, You Can Change Your Life. I'm going to recap it here because it's a really good tool to use when you're looking for some motivation to meet your goals. It's a really good place to start. So the thought model, it all starts with a circumstance, which you have a thought about. That thought causes a feeling. The feeling leads to an action. And then your actions give you your results. Now, as an example, I'm happy to share mine with you. So as I've shared previously, I put on a bit of midsection weight around this midlife transition. And I've been over the last couple of months working on removing it from my body, which is going really, really well. I'll share more about that in the future, I promise. But for now, the circumstance for me is my waistline has increased. Or it could be I've put on excess weight, or my BMI is just outside the normal range. Now remember, the circumstance is always neutral, just the facts. It can be proven in a court of law, no drama, but then comes my thoughts about it. Now let me tell you, I've had a few thoughts about it. In the past, I tried old tried and true tricks that didn't budge an ounce. Intermittent fasting, lots of cardio, etc., etc. And I had some thoughts of, oh well, it's just menopause. I'll just have to accept it and move on. And I sat on that nail for a while. It took me some time to finally get to the place where I believed it was possible. And I found better, more useful thoughts, and now I'm succeeding. Slowly, but succeeding. So I was able to find a few more helpful thoughts. One is, just like I said, I believed it was possible. If other women can do this, I can too. That led me to a feeling of determination, which then led to the action of making a plan, and then the result is ongoing, consistent fat loss. There's a difference between fat loss and weight loss. I'm doing this very carefully, and I'm doing everything I can to protect my muscles, so the weight loss is not coming from any muscle, but it's coming from fat. And again, I'll share more of that on later episodes. So I was determined, but what thoughts led to the feeling of motivation? Now, truthfully, I love a good challenge. And when I had the thought, if other women can do this, I can too, that is very motivating for me. Another thought that is really motivating is I want to be the example of what is possible. That's a huge motivating thought for me. And these motivating thoughts would have also been part of my why, along with this muffin top is uncomfortable. My clothes are uncomfortable and I don't want to buy new ones. I really like the ones I have. Visceral fat is putting me at risk of chronic diseases. So all of those thoughts led to the feeling of motivation. So all you need to do is start playing with the model and looking for the thoughts that give you a feeling of motivation, determination, commitment, maybe excitement, feelings that will result in actions that give you the results that you want. Okay, so we talked about how to get effective thoughts that give us empowering feelings. Now we move to the actions. So I've accomplished a lot of goals in my time, some against pretty ridiculous odds. And when I reflect on how I've done these things, I realize that I always first think about it for a while. So contemplation. I want it. I think about what I have to do to get it. I make a plan. These are the actions we will need to do to get where we want to be. So the next step is the plan. But before I talk about the plan, I want to touch on willpower because having a good solid plan is going to take a bit of pressure off your willpower. Let me tell you a little secret. If you rely on willpower alone, you're going to make it a lot harder on yourself than it needs to be and also decrease your likelihood of success. Willpower takes a lot of energy. From the time we wake up in the morning until the time our head hits the pillow again, we're making decisions. Even the decisions that you don't think about as being decisions. What am I having for breakfast? What am I feeding the family? What am I having for lunch? What time do I need to be going this morning? Should I leave 5 minutes early? What am I wearing? You're making calls all day long. And there's something called decision fatigue. Decision fatigue refers to the deteriorating quality of our decisions after a long period of decision making. And what we know is that when decision fatigue sets in, we make poorer choices, we avoid making any more decisions, and we opt for the easy options. So pre-planning helps take some of the load off of the decision making. If you don't plan ahead and then it comes time to do the things you need to do to meet your goal, all of those decisions you've already made are going to likely impact your ability to stay on task. Your willpower will be weak. So yes, use some willpower, but also put into place all the strategies that we're discussing today, and you're going to be that much more likely to reach your goal. Now, small, simple steps are the best way to achieve any goal. What is the first thing that I can do? Just one small thing. Get out that journal and write it down. When the thing you want to do seems enormous, it can be overwhelming. By breaking it down into small steps, it feels more doable, less overwhelming. Pre-planning is also one of the key steps in staying ahead of your toddler. Yes, I said toddler. This brings me to the toddler with a Sharpie. I love this analogy, again from Brooke Castillo, who I've mentioned before. All of us have that little voice in our heads that seems to be working against us when we're trying to make a change or just generally trying to do the right things in life. It's like a toddler with a Sharpie running around loose in our heads. You know the one. I don't want to get out of bed and exercise. It's cold and I'm tired and I don't want to. Let's do it tomorrow. It's just one piece of pizza. Everyone else is having a glass of wine, but I really want that chocolate. Being prepared for that toddler is just like pre-planning for any toddler. If you've had children, you know that when you go somewhere with a toddler, you have to be prepared. Sometimes you take snacks, toys, whatever you're going to need to keep them occupied when you're trying to get something done. Have lunch with a friend, go to the doctor, do the shopping. It's just like that. Having your walking shoes or your gym clothes there ready to go in the morning, not keeping chocolate or wine or potato chips or cigarettes or whatever it is you're trying to overcome in the house, pre-preparing your lunch, meal prepping on the weekends, planning the next day the night before, whatever, just planning ahead and being prepared. This takes a whole load of stress off of the decision fatigue I touched on earlier. Now, there's still going to be some times when it gets a bit harder, your toddler's really having a tanty. Whatever you do, don't reason or argue with it. Just let it have its tantrum and get up and do it anyway. Some days it won't be as easy as that, and you're going to listen. It's going to be dark and cold, and you don't want to get up and exercise. This is when I remind myself of the outcome. I actually visualize myself there, already having accomplished it, not doing it, but being done with it, because sometimes if I see myself in my mind's eye in the gym doing it, it just looks too exhausting. and that works against me. So rather than actually seeing myself do it, I see myself after I've done it and that energized, accomplished feeling that I get. I also see it not done and what that looks like, which usually looks like regret and wishing I had just done it anyway. I remind myself the time is going to tick on by and I can get there having accomplished something, or I can get there and wish I had stuck with it because I would be done by now and I would have had a better experience at the end. The trick here, though, is not to overthink it. For example, I have a group of very fit girlfriends, and we cycle together every Sunday. It's a brisk ride, and it can be very challenging, but it is fabulous. We talk and laugh the whole time. It's really pretty much like therapy. For an hour, our heart is pumping, our pulses are racing, our legs are burning. But we live in the most amazing place in terms of weather. So even though it can get a bit cold in the winter, we still often have really clear blue skies. The sun's almost always shining. We live in a rural setting and it's really lovely. The birds are singing, there's wildlife. We could see a kangaroo from time to time. And afterwards, the endorphins kick in and you get this high from the exercise and the connectivity and the coffee. It's awesome. But sometimes, especially in the winter, there are times when it's cold and I'm tired and I don't feel like doing it. Or so my toddler tells me. But all I have to do is remind myself of how I'm going to feel when it's all over, and I almost never miss a ride. None of us do. Really has to be a good reason. So if I've been up all night delivering a baby or something like that, or I'm sick, that's pretty much the only times I miss my ride. One surprising thing I found to be helpful in meeting goals came unexpectedly from an app called Duolingo. I'm using it to learn Spanish. Earlier this year, I did a walk on the Camino Trail that was in Spain, and I knew I was going to do this walk for about 2 years before I did it. And I made this goal that I wanted to learn Spanish before I went so I could speak the language on the trail because it's a pretty rural trail. I signed up to do Duolingo, which is a language learning app. One of the things that the app does is keep track of how many days in a row you've done a lesson. They call it a streak. My kids used to do something similar on Snapchat when they were teenagers. They might still do it. I don't know. So they had a streak with their friends on how many days in a row they snapped each other. I didn't see how powerful a streak could be until my experience with Duolingo. The streak really worked for me. After a while of being on the app, one of the motivators to not miss a day doing a lesson was that I would lose my streak. It turns out that there's some actual science and evidence behind the idea that keeping a streak going can be a useful tool in meeting a goal, making a change, or breaking or forming a new habit. We know that consistent behavior over time helps in forming habits, and when you maintain a streak, you're reinforcing a behavior until it becomes more automatic. We also know that once people commit to something, they're more likely to stick with it to be consistent with their previous actions. Keeping a streak can enhance this sense of commitment. Streaks can also make the goal more like a game, which can make tasks more fun and engaging. The feeling of progress and achievement when maintaining a streak can trigger the brain's reward system, which releases dopamine, which we've talked about before. It's a feel-good neurotransmitter in our brain in response to achieving our goals. So it feels good to keep the streak, which can also be a powerful motivator. And the idea of losing a streak can create a sense of loss aversion, where the fear of breaking the streak can be a strong motivator to keep going. There's a psychological theory that people are more motivated by the fear of losing something they already have than by the potential of gaining something new. It certainly worked for my Duolingo. I'm up to day 1031. And though I was not anywhere close to being fluent on my trip to Spain, I could get by with what I had learned, and I am now motivated to continue on, maybe to go back and maybe even be better with the language. Now, this brings me to a common pitfall for people trying to reach a goal, and that is all or nothing thinking. There are a few ways that all or nothing thinking can present. So you could view situations as entirely good or bad, no shades of gray. For example, If a person doesn't meet a goal perfectly, they might see the whole thing as a failure rather than seeing partial successes. They could overgeneralize and make broad conclusions based on a single event. Like if someone misses a workout, they might decide they're completely out of shape and totally hopeless at maintaining their fitness routine. Might even quit. There could be perfectionism, where they set unrealistically high standards and decide that anything less than that is a failure, which can be really discouraging and cause them to give up if the standards aren't met. All or nothing thinking is a serious sabotage that can suck the motivation right out of you and destroy your progress. This is where I would like you to consider a streak freeze. Do you seriously think that in 1,031 days I haven't missed a single lesson? Look, I've done pretty well, but there have been days that I just haven't been able to get there. Along the way, after short periods of consistency with my lessons, Duolingo awarded me with streak freezes. So rather than have to go all the way back to day one, if I missed a day, I could be forgiven, and I could forgive myself for missing a day, and I would keep my streak. Now, my streak freezes are limited. I only have so many, and I have to earn them. But wow, what an amazing gift. For the absolute majority of those 1,031 days, I have put in the time, and one of the things that keeps me consistent is protecting my streak. I learned a little about myself in this process, and that I do practice a bit of all or nothing thinking. I imagine we all do in different situations. It reminded me, though, that I do not have to be perfect all of the time. A good 90% will do. Just because I missed one day doesn't mean it's all a waste. I could see my progress and how I'm learning more with every lesson that I do, which are also motivating factors. And I still have the goal of becoming really proficient in speaking the language. The concepts of streaks and streak freezes have helped me, I think, with other goals, like the restructuring of my midsection. When I look at every day as a day closer to my goal, and when I'm tempted to go off of my plan, which will set me back a day, I remind myself of this, and in a way, it's like keeping my streak. I know that each day will add up. I just have to keep adding them together. But if I go a bit outside of my plan, I recognize it as just one day, and I don't throw in the whole towel because I got a little off track for one day or one meal. There would have been a time when I may have made one poor choice and thought, stuff it, I've messed it all up anyway, and that would be that. And it might lead to quitting altogether or several days off track until I could put it all together again. I know this is common with other people too, because I hear it often from my patients, but this new approach to all or nothing thinking has really helped me dust myself off and get back at it again tomorrow. So I would encourage you to really challenge those all or nothing thoughts. If you miss a workout, instead of thinking, I've ruined my fitness routine, you might reframe it as, I missed a workout, but I can get back on track tomorrow. Another thing that could be done with all or nothing thinking is to reevaluate your goal. Could you break it down into smaller, more achievable steps? Would that be helpful? And if you do relapse, as we talked about in the stages of change, it's worth having a good look at what set you back. Was it all or nothing thinking? Was it your toddler? Have you done the prep work or the pre-planning? Did you take a second to remember your why? Did you think about what it looks like if you do or don't do whatever it is you're thinking of doing that is taking you off track? Getting your journal out and doing a little dissecting can be really helpful. Start thinking about it again. Okay, why did I decide I wanted to make this change in the first place? You can work on getting yourself back into contemplation, and remember, if someone else has done it, you can too. Being really curious can be so helpful in getting you back on track. Showing self-compassion can be just as helpful. My advice is to work on coming up with a rescue plan for when that thing that derailed you last time happens again. Brainstorm some strategies that you could use next time. In my experience, it is usually when things are the hardest that the breakthrough is so very close. And as I said before, if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep getting back in step and forgiving yourself when you take a misstep, you will eventually get to where you want to be. So there you go, guys. I hope this has been helpful. As always, I would love your feedback. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as Opt2Thrive and TikTok at dr.c494 or on my website, opt2thrive.com. Please share the podcast if you can think of anyone who might enjoy it as well. By rating and reviewing the podcast, it makes it more visible for those who are looking for this information. And don't forget to subscribe. Have a great couple of weeks, everyone. And until then, I hope you opt to thrive.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts her medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opt2thrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.